This is the ROS Developers Podcast, episode 91.
The ROS Developers Podcast, the ROS Developers. The ROS Developers Podcast, the ROS Developers.
Hello, ROS developers, and welcome to the ROS Developers Podcast, the podcast that gives you insights from the experts about how to program your robots with ROS. This is Ricardo from The Construct, and today we have the second episode of our series about how to create your own robotics startup. And because of that, then this episode is dedicated to all of you that are thinking about building your own robotics startup. Maybe you have already started. Maybe you are considering. Great. This episode is dedicated to you. And before continuing with the episode, I would like to say thank you to all of you who have sent me a feedback about the first episode of this series. So we have received a lot of feedback from that by email or putting some comments on the video in YouTube of this episode. And that was awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. I answered already to all of you by the corresponding channels, but would like to thank you publicly here in the episode. So thanks very much for that awesome feedback. And please continue doing it. So if you like this episode, you don't like it also, please let us know, because the goal of this series is to help all of you that are thinking about building your own startup from the point of view of myself, because I have already built one at some degree of success. So I hope that this is interesting for you, and let's continue. If not, let me know in the feedback by email. Okay, so this episode is entitled Get Your Team Right. What do I mean? Okay, so in order to create your startup, you will need three basic things. The first one is the idea about what your startup has to be about. That's the product. That's what we already covered in the previous episode. Then the second thing that you are going to need is to have a team that is able to build this product and show it to the audience, to the market. And that's the subject of this episode. Then the third thing that you need is a small amount of money to start implementation. And this is going to be discussed on the next episode, okay? So for this episode about getting your team right, let me tell you also that the three main reasons why startups fail. The first one is that there is no market need for the things that you are building. So what you are providing, nobody wants to buy because they don't need it. Maybe there are nice things to have, but not something that is really, really useful, or that people would pay for that. Then I think that this is the subject, more or less, that we covered in the previous episode. And that's why I stressed so much about getting your idea right and simplifying and making it simple as much as possible, because you are not sure about your product. This is very difficult to get it right in the first time, on the first place. So for that, you are going to need to test and to move and to change and so on. That's why simplicity at the beginning of your startup is so important, because you need to achieve this market need. So to build a product that is going to be needed by the market. We'll cover about methodologies about how to find this market need in future episodes. Okay, so we started with simplifying the idea. That's a very first step, and then we need to do a method in order to be changing the product when we discover that is not required by the market. Okay, so that's the no market need is the first reason why startups fail. Then the second one is run out of cash. And for me, this option is the same as the previous one. So you are building something that nobody wants to pay for, so you run out of cash because you waste all your time trying to build something that nobody wants it, so you don't get cash back. Okay, yeah, but I will get some investors. And so, okay, yeah, you maybe have some round of investors. So afterwards, what? You still don't have market need of your product, then this cash is going to run out again. So for me, it's the same. It's the same thing as previous one. It's very similar. I mean, okay, so there are some differences, I understand, but at this moment, for me, are the same. Then the third main reason why the startups fail, as you probably know, or you are now thinking about, you think, okay, is because it's about not having the right team. Yeah, exactly. That's the subject of this episode. So what does it mean about not having the right team? Well, you are going to need to have a team that helps you and supports you in the building of this startup. You cannot do the startup by yourself. And I understand how tempting it is to do the startup by yourself, especially for engineers like us, that what we want to do is to work in our project and forget about the rest of the world. Okay, so I understand perfectly because I am also an engineer, and yeah, so I think the same way. But thinking about doing the startup by yourself, it's a recipe for disaster because, well, several reasons. Let me explain you a few ones that I have been put in here for this episode that I think that are interesting. Well, the first reason is that you cannot handle all that is required. In order to build a startup, you are going to need to do a lot of work, and you cannot do it by yourself. And again, I know that how you feel about that because I also felt that. We are engineers after all. So I understand you, my friend. I understand you. But this is not realistic. You need to be realistic if you want your startup to succeed. And then here it is, the reality is that you cannot handle everything required to create your first prototype. And yes, I know that you believe you can, but you cannot. You cannot. I'm not telling that given a large amount of time and resources, you wouldn't be able to do it. I'm not telling that, okay? So I know you are intelligent enough to do it, but not in the amount of time required to have a proper product ready to be sold or ready to be tested if the market needs it. And it doesn't matter if it is software or hardware what you are trying to build in your startup. The thing is that the large amount of tasks that you will need to do is so big, so large that the amount of time required will be increasing, and you will not able to deliver. That's why you need a team. You cannot do this by yourself. Also, another reason is that you need other people on your team to tell you that your idea is stupid when it is. I mean, so yeah. So guys, we are talking between engineers, right? So we know which kind of guys we are. We fell in love with our own ideas. And some of them are great and some of them, they are just rubbish. We know that. But at the moment that we enunciate our idea, we think that this is the greatest thing of the world. So if you are you are working on your own, then it is more likely that you will think that your ideas are very, very great and start chasing all of them. You will think, oh, this is great. Then now let's go on this direction. Now let's go on the another one. And then the time will be passing, and then you will consume all your resources and again, go back, run out of cash and finish your adventure in a startup. So you need somebody to provide you with other opinions that can act also as a filter for your on stupid ideas. So let me put it plain in the table. Okay, so I have, to the day of today, I have many stupid ideas. Many. And thanks that my team, they have the courage to tell me. And also because we have implemented this environment, that safe environment, where anybody can say, hey, I think you are wrong because of this, of this. Okay, that's another subject. It's about the culture of your startup. We'll cover this in further episodes. I think that we need to increase the frequency of the episodes, because otherwise it's going to take us for a whole year to cover all the important subjects. So I'm going to think about it. If you want to push me on making more episodes like this and at a faster rate, then please send me a message. Tell me something. Give me some feedback. So you will motivate me to do this. Well, so that's the second reason, to get somebody to tell you that they don't agree on this thing, or that we can modify in this way, or so on. Then another reason to have a team is that you are not transmitting a sensation of professionalism to anybody that is looking at your startup. So it looks like you are just having your hobby there. And in case that you are going to need investors later, that is very likely, they will not take you seriously. Because solopreneurs, they doesn't look serious. They look like they are just playing. And they will not trust that you can keep building the product to make them rich. And also, so basically because showing just a single person is indicating some way that you have problems managing other people or working with other people. So this problem is going to appear later when you need to scale your business. And that's what the VC, the venture capitalists, they are going to detect if you are presenting your company as with a single founder. And then another reason why, it's that you are not preparing yourself for what is coming. So you're not training yourself. And this is by far, I think, the most important point. So if you want to build a startup, you're going to need a team in the short term, like it or not. Even if you get successful here right now with this thing that you have done by yourself, let's say, okay, then the next step is to get a team in order to scale or to modify it. You cannot scale by yourself, of course, especially in robotics. So you're going to need a team to work with you in a short term if you are successful. Then you're going to need to learn to work with other people, to synchronize with them, to negotiate, to make arrangements, to solve conflicts, to make people happy of their job, and all these kind of things that it's related to leadership and management of people. And yeah, I know that you are thinking right now that you are not building a startup to do all that. Yes, you are building a startup to put a cool product in the world. And yes, that is right. That is correct. But in order to be able to do that, to put this cool robotics product in the world, you need to do all the rest. You need to manage people. Unless, of course, that you don't want to manage anybody, and then you will be managed by somebody else. But you cannot be in both places at the same time. That's also a recipe for disaster. So the typical position of a founder that wants to do the engineering job, but then there is the manager of the engineering job that is providing to him orders, and he doesn't want to accept his orders because he's not a founder and he is not his company. So that's a disaster. That's another disaster. So if you want to be leading your company, you will need to learn how to manage people. And then now at the beginning of the startup is a very good moment because you can start training yourself. It's a small team, and Then you can start practicing, learning about how to do that, and then scale your learning as your company scales. As a conclusion, I would say that leading a team is the most difficult job. It is more difficult than creating the intelligent robots. Really, I know you are thinking, oh, this guy is crazy. Why is he here? No, it's really, when you try, you will see that's super difficult. And leading a team means, I mean that making a team to achieve a goal. Okay, as a team. As yourself, it's quite easy, because if you are only yourself, then you can, with a little bit of discipline, you can manage yourself. But when you put other people in the loop, in the place, so it's not only managing yourself, but you have to manage other people with very different background, very different ideas. That's super difficult. It's super difficult. So I admire those guys that have those teams. For example, I don't know, SpaceX, and they achieved to get the rockets doing this. Wow. I don't know how they manage. I mean, they have to be so great managing people. That's awesome. And I know you mean, hey, but is the technical skills? Yeah, the technical skills is okay, but that's at the end of the effector of the chain. Before reaching that point of having to apply your the engineering skills, you need to have all the rest that allows the application of the engineering skills, and that is people in the middle, managing the different tasks, the different priorities, all in synchronization with all the other requirements about getting the clients, getting people's approval, opinion approval, and so on. So what I want to state here is that it's more difficult, is the most difficult job to lead the team. And personally, I don't like to do that job. Really, that's why I studied engineering. I didn't study engineering to manage people. I studied engineering to build robots, to build things that are intelligent. But, well, for some reason, it looks like I'm not bad at it. So I consider managing as one of the parts of my job that I don't like, but I do extremely carefully, because I think it's essential to the success of our company. So in your job, there are always things that you like and things that you don't like. And that's it, how I treat this thing. Then I can have the time for doing the things that I really like. So those are some reasons why you should get a team. Then let me clarify that when I'm talking about a team, I'm talking about co-founders. What does it mean, co-founders? So the founder is the person who creates first, in the first place, the company. Okay, so the co-founders are the other guys that are beside you to found this. So actually all of them are at the same level. So the co-founders are those that are the people that will create the startup with you. And you share the ownership of the company between all of you. That is a different point from people who work at a company for a salary. Actually, in your startup, you can have people that is just working for you, but then you will have to pay a salary. The co-founders are co-owners, but the workers are not. And their privileges and salaries are different. Usually lower salary for co-founders. We'll cover how much to pay to co-founders and to workers in the next episode. But basically, co-founders should be able to work for free because they own a part of the company. And if you have some money to spend now, you may be interested in hiring people, workers, with the ones who doesn't have a part of the company. But in that case, you will have to pay them a salary. Of course, you have to compensate their work, of course, in some way. So the co-founders, usually they get compensated by the amount of part of the company that they have. And in general, well, it depends on how you build this, and we will deal about this on the next episode, but usually all the co-founders, they have the same percentage unless some special cases happen. We'll discuss this on the next episode. But I'm assuming here that you have no money to spend on salaries, so you would like to find co-founders that take the risk with you. And then, having said that, what is the minimum number of co-founders that you can start with? Well, you need to start with the minimal team, the minimum amount of members. Because remember that at this time, you're still not generating any money. So you will be on your savings or on your loans that somebody lent you. Then you don't know if your product is going to be accepted by the market, and it's very, very likely that you will need to continue for doing a few rounds of modifications of testing before getting into the product that actually is generating some revenue for you. For that, you need to start with a minimum amount of people in your team. So if you are thinking about getting an investor, you say, oh, yeah, well, don't worry, I'm going to get an investor. So no investor is going to invest in your idea without a demonstration that your product is interesting for the market. So don't count on that money yet. You need to prove first that your product has a market. So then for building your product, you will be relying on your savings or loans that your family and friends, they lend you. Or maybe you ask also a loan to the bank. That's a little bit more dangerous. And I don't recommend that at this point. But we'll discuss this on the next episode, okay? Who is about how to get the money for starting your startup. So you need, then I said the minimum amount of people, and you should not start with too many people because your funds, those that you have from your savings or loans, they will deplete quickly. So the minimum necessary, the minimum amount of people necessary to get your startup running, I think it's 2 people. One for getting the engineering work done, and another to do the business part done. And this is a minimum, okay? So it depends on the time schedules that you have. It depends on the complexity of the project, and it depends on the amount of money that you have that for a start. Because you will need to buy some pieces to construct your prototype or rent some computers, or I don't know, or maybe it depends on how you are planning to do that, but maybe you will need to get some minimum survival money for you and your co-founders. Maybe. I don't know. We'll discuss this on the next episode. But in any case, if you can do it with 2 people, only focused on the business part, on getting the product that people likes, right? And the other on building that product, whatever it is, hardware or software, then that's okay. And at the construct, for example, we started with 1 person doing the business side, who was myself, and I had no idea about how to do that at that time. And the rest of the team, 3 people developing the product. And I think that this is a lot. But when I started to do this, I had no idea about how to build a startup. I just jumped into the swimming pool and see if there was water once I crashed against the floor. So I don't recommend you to have so many people. In our case, it was a success because we have survived many, many years, and we are profitable. But the more people you get, the more difficult it is to take decisions. And also, your resources, they are depleting faster. So, again, I think that 2 is the minimum. And for most of the cases, I don't think you will need more than one business people, because the goal of the startup is at this point is to discover if your product has any traction or not, and design the proper experiments to figure out how to change the product to achieve traction. And I think that this work can be managed by a single person at this point of the startup. So one business person is okay. Then for the engineering, it depends on the complexity of your product that you are building. And as I said, the complexity, the amount of money that you have, and the amount of time, the time at which you want to deliver the product. So if it is very complex and you want to have it quickly, you will need more people. Another thing I want to say about this team of co-founders is that even if I have differentiated very clearly about the business part and the engineering part, in reality, that doesn't apply. I mean, yes, it does apply, so you are in charge of this and you are in charge of that. But usually we all do works of everything, because it's very likely that everybody will have to do marketing tasks, show demos to clients, call to clients, follow them, and so on, even if you are an engineer working on developing the software for the robot. Yes, and also the engineering, the business guy, also, if he has some knowledge of engineering, he can help on some of the tasks when he's waiting for some experiment to generate solutions. For example, even if it's simple work of engineering like testing or or getting ideas, and if he has engineering knowledge of software or hardware, then he can put directly hands into the job and build a product directly. Okay, so that's what happened to us. Because I'm an engineer, so I know about the job. And then I had to learn about the other job, the business part. But that's something that I'm going to tell you later. So another point that I want to tell, and that you should take care, is about selecting the people for your team. So you have decided, okay, we are going to be, 5 people. Yeah, okay. Then who should I get on board? Then it's very likely you will be tempted to ask your friends or family for that. And I think that this is a little bit dangerous to do this, because being friends is one thing, but working together to make a startup succeed is another very different. It is not even close to working together in a third-party job. Let's say that you and your friend, you are hired by the same company and you are working together there. Okay, that's okay. But when you are working together to make a startup succeed, that's something different. The startup is your baby. And of course, of your team of co-founders. But it may happen that your friend's style to manage their babies is different than yours, especially when it concerns to the work ethics. Why I'm telling you that? Because startups require a lot of work. Work ethics means basically how hard are you going to work to make your startup successful. And any successful startup has required massive amounts of work. So expect that. A lot of work. Then you can disagree with your co-founders on the use of one technology or another. And this is probably not going to break the team. But if you disagree on the work ethics of the company, then that's a point that can make your company break. For example, personally, I prefer the work ethics of Elon Musk. basically it's work a lot, insanely number of hours. But other people think that this is not a proper way because you need more rest and so on. That's okay. Okay, so each one has his vision for his startup. The problem is when you mix those two different visions together. So if your partner wants the weekends free to go with the family, but you don't, or vice versa, then you are going to have a clash. It's a clash of opinions on a very basic point. In startups, you are going to make so many errors. And in my opinion, the best strategy to solve those is to work more. And you have to work more in order to compensate the errors quickly. That is why, if that's the case in your company, then the person who is working more is going to feel that the others are not doing their part. And this is the beginning of a very deep discussion and very difficult to solve because you cannot convince the other part of your working style. And you will think, well, what I'm going to do is to learn to work smarter, but not harder. So then I will be able to do more things in less time. Okay, that's very cool as a sentence. Work smarter, not harder. That's for a book. It's very cool. But in practice, this is not going to reduce your amount of hours of work, but include more things to do. So if you are able to work smarter, that means that you will be able to do more things in the same amount of hours, and then you will put a lot of more tasks and a lot of more hours. And why? Because you need it. You need it in order to get your startup taking off. In order to get your startup taking off, you need to do massive amounts of work. Do not trust those guys that say, I did it in one weekend, I did it in... There is one, okay, so maybe one, and it's because of chance. It's just because of chance. They got lucky. And I'm happy for them. I would like to be lucky myself. It's not the case. And it's not the case for the 99.999% of the other startups. And don't believe the others that say, no, it's not true. It's you are doing wrong. It's not necessary such amount of work. Okay, don't trust them. How many have you built? And even if they have built, maybe they are willing just to show themselves like they are not hustling. I don't know. But don't trust those. You are going to need to work a lot. Then, as a conclusion, do not select as a co-founder somebody because you just like him. You may end disliking him after a few months of pressure. Do not select that friend of yours with who you had most of the laughs when you were studying and together, and you always get, maybe he always left the study to the last day, or he was copying on the exams and having fun of that. So, unless you believe the same, you did the same things, and you believe in the same philosophy, of course. Okay, so if that's your philosophy, then that's going to work. But if it's different, if you think about working hard, then having this kind of person in your team is going to create a lot of problems. And the problems with friends and with family is that you cannot have a serious discussion with them at work and then forget about that on the personal life. That's one of the problems. Now, about how to distribute the jobs. Well, it's very good that in the team you have somebody who has studied business or has some experience on it. But if not, like it was in our case in the construct, do not worry too much if he doesn't have very much experience, do not worry too much. Just select the person, and then that person will have to start an express process to learn about it. And actually, that's one of the aspects that you will have to master in the creation of a startup. You will have to be learning continuously at high speed. You and all your co-founders also. There will be so many things that you don't know how to do it in business or in engineering, in the project that you want to solve. Then that you will have to dedicate to learn a lot of time. We'll also dedicate one episode to this subject because this is key, this is core. So don't worry too much if the person that you selected to the business doesn't know very much. Then just make sure that he's happy with his position. If it is you, then perfect. Then if it's somebody else, then also perfect. But he has to be comfortable with this active learning mindset that has to have. And then let me tell you that you don't have to be the CEO of the company if you don't like the position. Usually the engineers, they prefer to take the position of the CTO, that is the technical leader, and the CEO is the one that decides the direction of the company. So the CTO is the one that decides how technically reach that direction. But at this point of the startup, those titles doesn't matter because it's too early to define those well-separated works, because there will be a lot of overlapping and everybody will be helping in all the other tasks. So to distribution of the jobs, select the person that is going to do the business part, select the people that are going to work in the engineering in a general sense. And in both cases, engineering and business. So having the skills for doing that, it's okay. So it's perfect. If somebody has it, then that's perfect. That's better. But having those skills is not mandatory. It is more important to have this attitude, this mindset, to learn fast and jump into the problems. The whole team will need to learn a lot and very fast along the whole process. So the most important skill that you have to look for the people that are going to join to your team is this ability and this willing to learn fast and continuously. Then, having reached that point, let me tell you how we are going to apply this, those norms that I have explained to you, all this data that I have explained here to our startup about the robotic bartender. In our case, it's going to be we are going to be two people. So it's going to be myself as the business director, or the one that is going to do the tests, the demos to the clients, look for the clients, and so on. And then also a young engineer who is going to be the developer of the robot and its software. So basically the software, because the robot is, as I mentioned in the previous one, is just a few parts that we are buying and putting together. So we know that this is enough for this stage, at least until we do the first test, and then we assert that the robot is useful and somebody is willing to pay for it. So we are going to start with this team of two people. And actually, none of us is going to be full-time for this. But that's the subject of the next episode. Okay, so, and why is this? And how it's going to be managed and so on. Don't worry, we'll discuss this in the next episode. Then as a conclusion here for this episode, basically you have to get a few people to develop the product and at least one person to inspect how this product can be sold. And both teams are going to work very close, and sometimes they are going to overlap jobs. You don't need to assign any title right now, like CEO or CTO, just a group of guys that are working together in order to make this startup take off. And then that's it. So you on the next episode, as I mentioned, we are going to discuss about how to get the money, and also how to in order to start, and also how to compensate the team for their work. That's all for this episode. I hope that you learned something useful that can help you in your project. And that is all for today. See you next week with a new lesson from the ROS experts. And until then, keep pushing your ROS learning.